Hi everyone, my name's Ebani and welcome back to my channel.
Think I know you better to forget her. Certain people made for running. Think I need you more than let you know I'm bored and tell me this means more than nothing.
So today we are doing my April wrap up. Thankfully I'm getting this up sooner than I anticipated because I was able to finish all of my schoolwork for the semester yesterday actually. I turned in my last assignment and I'm so excited about that and about having my summer and being free to do like whatever I want. So today I've been working on my bullet journal, catching up on BookTube because I'm so behind on watching that, and I actually am posting about that on my Instagram and on my Twitter. I don't know that you can save fleets on Twitter, but I know on Instagram you can save like highlight stories. I've been posting on my stories about all of the different booktubers that I watch regularly and, you know, sort of giving them a shout out. So if you want any like booktube recommendations, go to my Instagram and there's like a booktube recommendations highlight and you can look at that and like check them out. To start off, we're going to be taking a look at my bullet journal for April. Here's my book stats page, yay. So in April, I read only 13 books, which is more than in January and February where I read 10 and 11, but less than in March when I read 16, which is kind of sad because like I started off the month really strong, so I was hoping to actually get past 16 this month because that would be amazing. My motivation sort of died out towards the end of the month, especially since we moved into like finals week and lots of final projects happening and have time to do that much reading, unfortunately. I read 4,705 pages. For reference, I read 5,517 pages in March, 3,393 pages in February, and 3,391 pages in January. I read 2 physical books, which is less than previously because previously I had read 4, 3, and 3 physical books. I read 11 audiobooks, which in March I read 12, in February I read 8, and in January I read 7. And I had 0 rereads, which the only month I ever had a reread was in March, and that was just 1 book. There is another category that I wish I had added on here, but when I made this page, I wasn't doing this, which I have started DNFing. I don't know if it's going to become a regular thing. I'm mostly doing it for a vlog that's coming, so stay tuned. I'm very, very excited to finally actually have time to read more for that vlog because I have a couple of books I still need to read before I can post it. But basically in the vlog, it's just I'm reading books that I'm not like super excited about or anything, so I'm reading 50 pages and DNFing if I don't like it. So I also have 3 DNFs in April that I will probably briefly mention, but I go into more detail about why I DNF'd it in that vlog that's coming, so just stay tuned for that. And then we have my page tracker page, which is right here. I did it in a light purple, so it's kind of harder to see, but as you can see, the lower ones are more pages read, and this is only for physical books. I did not track my audiobooks. So you can see like I started out pretty well. I had some good page numbers, and then the last 10 days of the month I read nothing, and that was mostly because I was just working a lot with school. It sort of just like crash landed for the end of the month there, which is kind of sad. And then also we have my April wrap-up page of all the books that I read in April, so this is kind of a preview of what you're going to see in this video. Now that we have finished that, let's jump into the actual books I read this month. So first I read Undivided by Neil Shusterman. This is the last book in the Unwind series, and I read books 2 and 3 in March, and I talked about them in my March wrap-up, so go check that out. I read Unwind, the first book, for my December Fantasy Challenge because I had read it when I was in like middle school, and I really liked it, but I never continued the series. So I reread it for the December Fantasy Challenge in order to continue the series, and I finally did that. There are 2 like novellas, I think, that I haven't read yet. And if I can find them, a way to get them and read them, I'll try to, but I just don't know if they're accessible to me at this point. So basically, a like quick synopsis of Unwind is it's set in a dystopian world where when you turn 13, between ages 13 and 18, your parents have the ability to have a retroactive abortion or to unwind you. And basically that is, they've come up with this way to donate every single part of a person's body, but it like doesn't kill them. So you still have consciousness, but you don't have a body. And so it's like a really interesting, unique concept, and I think that it's delved into really well in the sequels. I talked about that in my March one, where I feel like Neil Shusterman really pushes the edges of the box that he's created for this world. And he's like, really, what can I do with this? Like, beyond what you would normally think. Like, he really thinks outside the box. and I really appreciate that. So this book, I'm not going to tell you very much because it is the end of the series and I don't want to do spoilers, but it was a very good ending to the series. The climax was everything, and the ending was honestly a bit emotional, and I really appreciated that. So I gave this book 4 stars. Then I read Small Great Things by Jodi Picoult. This is my second Jodi Picoult book because I read My Sister's Keeper in like November or something. This is part of my attempt to be well read in the adult genre because I work in the adult genre at the bookstore, which, by the way, this is my independent bookstore day shirt that I got from work, and I love it so much. I work in the adult section, and I've only read like a handful of adult books, so I'm like really trying hard to read more adult books so I can do my job better. So this is part of me trying to do that. This book follows a woman named Ruth who is a very experienced delivery nurse. One day Ruth does a routine check on this child that was born a couple days ago, but the newborn parents get very offended because they are white supremacists and Ruth is black. And then Ruth's manager makes like a note that no African American nurse is to tend to that child when Ruth is the only African American nurse that works in her small hospital, so it's just very obviously pinpointed at Ruth, and it's so blatantly racist. So then a few days later, while that baby is still at the hospital before they're able to go home, the hospital's so busy, they're just like swamped with people, there's like emergency C-sections happening, and like all of the staff is extremely busy. And so this baby is in this ward because he had just had a circumcision, so like he had to like stay under watch to make sure that he's not like reacting negatively to that surgery. So all the nurses are completely busy and Ruth is the only person who is able to watch those children. There was a different nurse who was supposed to, but she was like, Ruth, can you please watch this, because she had to go do something because they were so busy. And so Ruth was watching all of the babies in this section, but then she realized that this baby wasn't breathing, and so she hesitates because she's not supposed to tend to this child. Like, she'd be going against her manager, but also, like, if she doesn't do anything, then the baby is going to die, and she will not have done her job as a nurse. And she just is a very compassionate woman and wants to do everything she can to help everybody. And so, like, she wants to help this baby, but she was told not to. So I'm going to tell you this next part. It is in the synopsis of the book, so it's not really a spoiler, but I guess like if you don't want to know, like, you can fast forward a little bit. There are like timestamps down below if you want to just like skip to the end of this book. Go ahead, feel free. So the baby ends up not making it, and now Ruth is being charged with a very serious crime. And then so there's this public defender named Kennedy who is white, and she hears about Ruth's case and then takes Ruth's case. Ruth is like obviously wants to bring up racism in the courtroom because that's so obvious, like that's what happened. And Kennedy's like, no, like, we shouldn't do that. It's not a good strategy if you want to win this. So then Ruth has to decide whether to do what she knows is right and to bring up racism, or to take the easy route and get her a lesser sentence. This book literally had me feeling all sorts of ways. I loved the way they talked about race and how that conversation doesn't typically get brought up in a courtroom because, as Kennedy claimed, it's an easy way to lose your case because juries are biased, judges are biased. It's so important that this is talked about and realized among our society. I was listening to the audiobook of this while I was driving, and I was literally screaming. I was so angry with everything that was happening. Unfortunately, the only thing I wish that was different is that if it was an Own Voices story, because Jodi Picoult is white, I just wish it was an Own Voices story. I read The Dream Thieves by Maggie Stiefvater. This is the second book in the Raven Cycle series, and I am buddy reading this series with Katie from Katie Can't Read and a bunch of other people. We have like a whole Discord chat thingy. I literally have no idea what's going on in this series. I read the first book for my December Fantasy Challenge as well, and that was the second time I had read it, because I had read it on audiobook and I comprehended nothing from the audiobook. So then I decided I wanted to read it physically because I really wanted to like this series, and so I read it physically for my December Fantasy Challenge, and I'm like, I still don't know what's happening in this book. But Katie convinced me to continue the series, and I was like, okay, but you're gonna have to like explain like every single thing that's happening. You have to hold my hand the entire way because I do not retain anything from this series, and I don't know why. But I wanted to like it. I'm doing it, but it's a struggle. As of this book, I will say I was getting a better understanding of some of the characters, but I'm still a bit lost. And I did end up reading the third book in this series also this month, and I'm completely lost on that book. So like, I was starting to understand it, but then I like lost that somehow. Anyway, I gave it 3 stars. Like, I don't really have that many thoughts on it because like I comprehended barely anything. Next I read 4 Weeks 5 People by Jennifer Yu. I did technically have this book. I did like a big unhaul. I think that was my last video, and I gave all of my books to my roommates because I was like, if you want these you can have them, and they ended up taking all of them. So I don't have these books anymore because my roommates are all packed up. One of them already went home, but my other roommate has all of her stuff packed up because she's gonna be leaving in a few days. So I don't have the books to like hold them up, but of course I will show a picture. But I did read it physically when I read it. So I read this book for that vlog that I mentioned at the beginning of this video where I'm reading books I don't like and like DNFing if I'm not liking it. So this was the first book I read for that vlog. I only continued it because one of the characters has an eating disorder, and I know that was the reason why I bought it in the first place. Like, I only cared about that one character. The other characters weren't very interesting or even well developed, and I will say the mental health rep in this book is garbage, even among the eating disorder. Like, it is not the best mental health book I've read. It was also set at a camp, like a summer camp, and it was a weird setting for this kind of thing because it was a summer camp that's supposed to like help them get better. Like, didn't feel like the counselors or people were like really doing anything to help them get better. Additionally, I have a lot of thoughts about the ending, but I'm not going to discuss them here because spoilers, but I do go into big depth, full depth in the vlog that's coming, so just stay tuned. I promise it will be coming soon. But I gave this book 2 stars. And then I read and DNF'd Thou Shalt Not Road Trip by Anthony John. Again, this is a book that I had, but I gave to my roommate. This I read for the same video, and it was my first real DNF, and that felt interesting. I knew by page 15 that I was going to DNF this book. The writing was not for me, and the story had a sense of like suspension of disbelief that was beyond what I could do for a book, especially a contemporary. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be a middle grade, which is another reason it just wasn't like written for my age range. It's about this boy who I'm assuming is a teenager. I don't think they actually ever said his age, at least in the portion that I read. He just wrote a like best-selling novel. It's only been out for like a week, and he's going on a book tour trip with his brother, and there's like some tension there, and I don't know, there's just a lot of suspension of disbelief in this book that I didn't care for. And also the characters were not interesting at all. I've said this before and I'll say it again. This book felt like the plot of one of those Disney Channel original movies, and I did not like that at all. Then I read The Project by Courtney Summers. I was very excited to read this book. It was one of my most anticipated releases for the year. Because it has to do with a cult. Like, yes, I'm here for that. But I heard some not very good things about this book, so that I was kind of like not as excited, but I was still excited. Like, I still wanted to read it. If you didn't know, this is the author of Sadie, and then it also came out in February, so it's a fairly recent release. It follows this character named Lo, whose parents died in a car crash, and her sister B left and joined Unity Project thing and like left Lo all alone. So after 6 years, Lo tries to get back in contact with her sister, and she finds herself diving deeper into the Unity Project and its charismatic leader. Gonna be honest, I think I have to agree with those negative reviews and say that this book was kind of disappointing for me. I was hoping that it was gonna be more focused on the aspect of the cult because I'm very interested in cults, but it was more a character study, I would say. The ending did start getting into the cultish vibes that I wanted from the rest of the book, but it wasn't enough to save the book, especially since it took so long to get to that point. I just wish there was more of that throughout the book, and I gave this one 3 stars. And then I read A Torch Against the Night by Saba Tahir. This is the sequel to An Ember in the Ashes, which I also read in my December Fantasy Challenge. I buddy read this with Mare from Mare Reads and Nicole from Nicole Reads and a couple of other people as well in like a group chat. If you don't know, this story follows these 2 characters, Laia and Elias, and it's a high fantasy story. The first book, anyway, Laia's brother gets kidnapped by the, I forget what they're called, but sort of like the governing body. And they're sort of like a dictatorship, kind of, sort of a bad governing body. She infiltrates that, trying to get information for the resistance in order to save her brother. And then we also have Elias, who is the son of the woman who is the dictator. He is like training in the first book, and then like they meet and there's sort of like romance there. I liked the first book enough to want to continue the series, but I didn't really care for this book quite as much. I did start to like Helene's character more in this book because I didn't like her at all in the first book. The ending of this book was really interesting, and I think is what saved it and makes me want to continue the series. Unfortunately, I think Mare has DNF'd A Reaper at the Gates, and she doesn't plan on reading the rest of the series. I haven't started A Reaper at the Gates yet. I do have the audiobook for it, so I might start it soon. So I don't know how I feel yet, if I'm going to continue the series or not. I guess we'll see how I'm feeling when I start to read A Reaper at the Gates. But A Torch Against the Night made me less excited for this series, and I gave it 3 stars. And then I read the only book that I can physically hold up and show you guys, Klara and the Sun by Kazu Ishiguro. I hope I said that right. This book is actually I got from the store. It's one of the perks of working at a bookstore, and I got it for free because it's a damaged copy, and if we have damaged copies and the publishers don't want them back, we can just like take them because we can't sell them. And really the only damage it has is like this top thing right here is split, which like you can barely tell. So I'm just really excited to have this and also like have it for free, which is even better. And it's like just came out not that long ago. It's on the bestsellers list. It's really like blowing up. So I'm just so excited to have it and to have read it. This book is very interesting. It's technically a dystopian sci-fi, but it honestly feels like a contemporary, which I was definitely here for because I do not really care for sci-fi fantasy dystopians that often. So it follows the main character Klara, who's actually an AI like robot, or they call them an AF, an artificial friend in this book. So yeah, there's a lot of like robotic sort of vibes from this, which is where it sort of falls into that sci-fi category. Klara her character is created so well that it literally feels like she's a real human and that it's a contemporary and that she's just living her life. And it's just so interesting the way that the author was able to write this story. It starts out with Klara being at the store that sold her, and then one day a family buys her and takes her home, and the daughter in that family is very sick. It's kind of hard to explain any more of what happens in the story. I feel like it's one of those books you just need to like go into and read without really knowing that much, because it's definitely a unique one. I really enjoyed it and I gave it 4 stars, and I'm so excited to have a copy to hold in my hands. I'm so excited about it. And then I read The Night We Said Yes by Lauren Gabaldi. This is another book I read for the vlog I keep mentioning, and I did have a copy of it, but do not have it anymore. So picture it is. I honestly was gonna DNF it when I got to page 50 because I wasn't really that interested, but I decided to keep going because I felt like a little hint of like a spark of interest, so I did end up continuing it. So I did end up finishing the book. It wasn't like amazing or life-changing, but it was okay. I feel like the main reason why I wanted to push through this book is because my friend Nicole from Nicole Reads messaged me and said that she really enjoyed this book when she was in high school, so I was like, okay, if Nicole likes it, maybe I'll like it too. So it's basically about this girl named Elle who used to date this guy Matt, and things were going really well between them, and then one day he just up and left without any explanation or what was going on. And so Elle's like furious with this. So it's like told in like dual timeline, because so the one timeline is like when they first met and like the night that really sparked their whole relationship, and the future timeline is the night when Matt comes back and they bump into each other at a party, and so there's kind of like a rekindle, like a second chance romance kind of vibe. I honestly preferred the current timeline over the past timeline because there was more like drama there, because like in the past timeline you know that like they're gonna be together, but in the current timeline like you don't know because she's really reluctant to trust him again because he up and left her before, and so there's kind of like a will they won't they kind of conflict there. I will say I didn't care for the fact that this book just barely passes the Bechdel test, which if you don't know what that is, it's basically this test that's used in movies, media, books, all that jazz, to test if it has good feminist vibes. I can't think of what the word I'm looking for is, but basically the criteria that they have to meet is that there are 2 female characters who both have names, and those 2 characters talk to each other about something that is not a boy or like a romantic relationship. And honestly, you'd be surprised about how many movies fail the Bechdel test, especially Marvel movies. And this book just barely passed it. I think there were maybe 1 or 2 conversations between Elle and her best friend that were not about Matt or their past boyfriends or the best friend's current fling or whatever. Like, the majority of the book was about those boys, and it hurt my feelings as a feminist. This book was okay. I ended up giving it 3 stars. Hey everyone, so I'm just sitting here editing this video to go up today, and I realized that I didn't talk about the other 2 books that I DNF'd this month. So basically, I DNF'd all the Major Constellations by Pratima Krantz, mostly because the main character was kind of toxic, and also I just wasn't vibing with the story. And then I also DNF'd How to Rock Braces and Glasses by Meg Haston. Because it was middle grade, and also I was kind of offended by some of the things that the book was talking about. I'll go into more detail in the vlog, the infamous vlog that is coming eventually. So yeah, I just wanted to bring those up too, because I did technically read 50 pages of How to Rock Braces and Glasses and 70 pages of all the Major Constellations. So I did technically read them in April. And then I read The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls. This is a memoir, and I decided to read it because a friend of mine from high school did this as her serious script. So like, she pulled parts from the book and performed it as a serious, and I saw it on Libby and I was like, why not? You know, like, I already knew part of the story, so I was kind of excited to see what the rest of the story would be. So my one issue with this book is that there was a lot of telling and not showing. She went through basically like as far back as she can remember as being a child to until she was an adult. So there was like a lot of ground to cover in this book, and therefore I feel like the showing sort of suffered because of that. It kind of reminded me of Educated by Tara Westover, where like both of their families are just literally insane and their home lives are just awful, and I feel so bad for both of them. So like that, I think, is what really like caught my attention the whole time. It's just like seeing the craziness that she's had to live in. There's some really powerful, in like a bad way, scenes and really graphic things that happened in this book, so just like maybe look up the trigger warnings if you decide to read this book, because there's a lot of stuff that happens. And I gave it 4 stars. Then I read Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, another book that I actually didn't read it physically because I mostly listened to the audiobook. But I did have the book because I had to read it for a class, but I gave that book to my friend because I'm like, I don't want this anymore. I read it for an English class, and basically this novel takes place in a world where there has been a pandemic and that wipes out most of the population, and it follows this traveling symphony that performs Shakespeare to the people who are left in the world after the pandemic. And so I wasn't really looking forward to this when I saw it on the syllabus, because I'm like, it's about a pandemic and we're living in a pandemic. Like, I read books to escape my life, not to read about the exact same things that I'm dealing with, especially something as stressful as a pandemic. But unfortunately, I had to read it because otherwise I would fail. There were way too many characters in this book for me to keep straight, like, especially because it was told in third person, so it was constantly bouncing around from POV to POV, but like it was in third person, so you didn't really like get to know that much about what they were thinking, and there were so many characters and it was just confusing and I could not keep them all straight. And it was kind of annoying because I was reading this for a class and I'm like, I need to be comprehending this, and I'm really not, because there's just so much happening. It was also told in a dual timeline, one before the pandemic hits and one after the pandemic has wiped out like majority of the population. And so like that also made it another level of confusing. I honestly didn't retain much of this book, unfortunately. It just wasn't for me, and I'm kind of sad about it because a lot of people do really enjoy this book, but number one, probably wasn't the best time for me to read it, and number two, the writing style just wasn't for me, so I ended up giving it 3 stars. Then I read Blue Lily Lily Blue by Maggie Stiefvater, the 3rd book in the Raven Cycle series, and of course I already talked about the Dream Thieves in this video, but I still don't know what's going on, and honestly I think I'm more confused after reading Blue Lily Lily Blue than after reading the Dream Thieves. But I will say that I love the title Blue Lily Lily Blue because it's so fun to say. You could just say it all day long. It's the most aesthetically pleasing title ever. I gave this one 3 stars as well. I read Broken in the Best Possible Way by Jenny Lawson. This is this author's newest memoir, and it is blowing up right now, actually. It's been on the bestsellers list for a long time, and then also at the bookstore we have this Indie Next bookshelf, which is like kind of like the bestsellers, but just like a different list of new books that are coming out that are like really hyped. So we have an Indie Next display, and it's been on there for a long time, and we also have a new and notable display, which are just like new books that are also hyped. Kind of, they're just like different ways to show people new books basically, and it's been on that one for a while as well. So this book is just like everywhere, it's blowing up, and I'm really excited to have read it. Again, branching out into my adult book goal and doing my job better, honestly. I was really excited to read this book because Jenny Lawson is the author of a different book called Let's Pretend This Never Happened, which I haven't read but I want to read soon. And I have friends from high school who did Let's Pretend This Never Happened as a duet script, and their duet was hilarious, and so I knew that obviously the book was pretty funny, and so Jenny Lawson herself is just a funny writer, and so I was just really excited to read Jenny Lawson's other book, especially because it was new. This book did not disappoint. It was hilarious. I was listening to the audiobook, and my boyfriend was like in the room while I was listening to it, and I was just dying laughing, and he's like, "What's so funny?" And I'm like, "This book is hilarious." Like, she's so funny. She's got a really interesting way of looking at the world, honestly. And there were also some more like sober points of this book as well, because she does struggle with mental health like a lot, and so there are points where she is like talking about her struggle with her mental health. So like it's got a good balance of like really funny things, but also really like important things and like sober things that you need to talk about. This book was so good, I highly recommend it, and I gave it 4 stars. And the last book I read in April was Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them by the author. I literally only read this book because I have the screenplay for Crimes of Grindelwald, which I bought like 5 years ago, and I want to read it because I'm trying to get through my physical TBR, and so I'm like, well, I have the Crimes of Grindelwald, I need to read the screenplay for Fantastic Beasts first. I honestly don't need to read the screenplay first because I've seen the movie and I know what happens, so it's not like I'm gonna be spoiled, but like my brain says that I need to read that one first. I saw Fantastic Beasts on Libby for the audiobook, and so I put it on hold thinking that it was the screenplay, but I didn't realize until I got the book that it was actually the like textbook thing that the Fantastic Beasts movies is based off of. So like normally I would not pick this book up because I don't really care and I don't really need more Harry Potter content than like what I already have. Like, I'm okay with it, but the author is just so problematic. I did decide to actually read it because the audiobook was only 2 hours long, and I listened on higher than double speed, so it took me like less than an hour to read. So I was like, it's another book to get off of my goal. It'll be easy to get through. I will say that it was narrated by Eddie Redmayne, who plays Newt in the movies, and I love Eddie Redmayne, so I was just really excited to like listen to his beautiful voice in this audiobook. There were also some really cool like sound effects that matched the different beasts that they were talking about, so that was like a nice little touch as far as audiobooks go. But like I said, I wouldn't have purposely picked up this book. It was kind of accidental, but I kind of just went with it, and I gave it 3 stars. So that is it for all the books I read in April. Unfortunately, I didn't read as many as I read in March. I'm still ahead by like 7 books on Goodreads, so it's fine. But thank you all so much for watching this video. If you liked it, make sure you're subscribed down below so you don't miss any future videos from me and the vlog that's coming, I promise. And if you want to follow me on social media, all my links are in the description box down below, as they always are. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye! So I don't really know how to take this thumbnail because this is the only book that I have physically, and like, woo, my April wrap up. Look, I read the one book. I might just like plopped some other random books on here just to make it look like I read more, because I did. I read so much. I just don't have the physical books anymore because I give them to my friends because I'm nice like that. So we're just gonna do this, and we're gonna pretend that these are all the books that I read, even though they are not.
All you see is black.